Well, hi, everyone. I'm Christopher Perez here in the Office of Graduate Diversity and Inclusion in the Graduate School here at University of Maryland, College Park. I have done a lot of virtual sessions over the 2021 summer, and I've been getting a lot of follow-up questions. So that really encouraged me to create a new series that we're going to call Ogdi Answers Your Questions. I've been getting a lot of questions about personal statements lately. So I am going to do a very quick sort of tips and tricks about personal statements that I think are useful for you to know, but there is a disclaimer here that I'm not going to cover everything in this video regarding personal statements, but I am going to cover enough that I hope that it helps you get started. Another disclaimer is that you should always work with faculty, mentors, your professors, current graduate students to help with your personal statement. Remember that everybody is different and everybody's story is going to be different. So today's Ogdi Answers Your Questions are about personal statements. And one of the consistent questions that I'm getting is, where do I begin? Or how do I start my personal statement? But before I answer that question, I just want to be clear that there are differences between a personal statement, a statement of purpose, a diversity statement, a vision statement, a research statement, and even a supplemental statement. If you are unclear about any of these, it is always in your best interest to contact the director or coordinator of graduate studies in the program that you are applying to and ask for clarification. All right, so there might be different kinds of statements that they ask. So if you're not sure the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose and a research statement, then contact the director or coordinator of graduate studies in your program and ask them to clarify. Okay, so that's the second thing. So knowing the differences between different statements. So I'm going to cover the personal statement today in today's video because that's the most common. Okay, and with the question, where do I begin, always comes with a follow-up question, which is, how much personal should I add if it's a personal statement? Well, if you're applying to University of Maryland, College Park, which is a Research One institution within the Big Ten Academic Alliance, then I would say be mindful about how much personal you get in your personal statement. I would follow the instructions as indicated, okay? If they say 3 to 5 pages, double space times New Roman, 1-inch margins, then do that. If you go against those instructions, well, then you might not be doing what they're asking, and that may put you in an unfavorable position. So always follow the instructions, all right, that are indicated in the application requirements, all right? So follow the instructions, understand the differences between different statements, and contact the director or coordinator of graduate studies. So I always have students begin by asking themselves 3 questions. And that is, why do I want to go to graduate school? What do I want to get out of graduate school? And what do I want to do after graduate school? Again, that's, why do I want to go to graduate school? What do I want to get out of graduate school? And what do I want to do after graduate school? So think of this as a journaling exercise. If you can answer those 3 questions for yourself, then you've already drafted a statement that admissions committees will be interested in reading, okay? Because that's essentially what they're looking for. They're looking for you to answer those questions. What do you want? Why do you want to go to graduate school? What do you want to get out of graduate school? What do you want to do after graduate school? Couple of tips that I would suggest as you're drafting, as you're thinking through these questions, these 3 questions, is be sure to use a strengths-based approach, okay? It's really important to talk about your challenges, but don't let that guide your personal statement. It's okay to talk about a challenging moment in your life that led you to your research area, okay, or your research interests. But what I would do is I would spend some time maybe addressing those challenges, but spend even more time talking about how you overcame those challenges. And the reason for this is that admissions committees will see this as somebody that can persevere through challenges. And graduate school is challenging. So make sure you use a strengths-based approach when writing your personal statement, okay? Don't spend 3 pages talking about how you've never had a good break, okay? And that you're always up against constraints. Talk about how you got to where you're at. Talk about how you got to the point of applying to graduate school. Okay, use that strengths-based approach. Another tip that I would suggest is consider telling the story you want to tell about yourself. I always approach this like a cultural anthropologist: where you've been, where you are now, where you would like to be. Okay, create a narrative, create a compelling narrative. All right. And consider the story that you're trying to tell. Remember, you are telling a story, and the personal statement is one of the first things that admissions committees look at. And so it's a way for you to introduce yourself to them, okay? So you want to write a story that compels them, that draws them in, and think of the story that you want to tell. And imagine how they will interpret the story that you are telling, okay? So that's another tip that I would say. Another tip that I have that I often address is don't just reiterate what's in your CV, okay? If you are given an opportunity to talk about something else, or given an opportunity to write something else, then do that. Don't just reiterate your CV in narrative form, because that's redundant. So your CV tells one story, your personal statement tells another, your writing sample tells another, and your letters of recommendation also tell another, as well as your GRE scores or other standardized exams, okay? So remember that if you are given an opportunity to explain or to tell a story about yourself in a different way, then do that. A lot of people fall in the trap of, well, what do I write about in my personal statement? I'll just reiterate what's in my CV. Well, an admissions committee person might see this and say, well, they just reiterated what was in their CV. They didn't really introduce who they are. Remember, the personal statement is a way to introduce who you are to them, what you're going to contribute, and then what you're going to do after you get your degree. So be sure to avoid redundancy. So another tip that I have is you really want to hook in your audience by crafting a compelling narrative about what motivates you and show them your drive for success. Give them a reason to be engaged and continue reading your application. The application, the graduate application, is in fact an indicator of how successful you will be in graduate school. So the personal statement operates in multiple ways. First, it's introducing who you are, what motivates you, what drives you, right? Second, it's a way to gauge your writing capabilities. It's a writing statement. It's an exercise in telling a story. So be sure to craft a compelling narrative, okay? So while there are no rules mandating what is a strong personal statement or what should be included in a quote unquote strong personal statement, here are a few other tips and tricks that I think are helpful. At least they've been, people have told me that they found them to be helpful. Be mindful about defining a moment that helps you steer yourself in the research that you're working on, okay? So in other words, don't spend 3 pages talking about how tennis is your favorite hobby. Instead, a personal statement should be a narrative where you use a defining moment that helps them understand how you got interested in this research, okay? So consider using that moment as a focal point in your essay, okay, in your personal statement. Be original. Do not be generic in any way, okay? Be original. In other words, it's your story. So don't tell somebody else's story. Tell your story and tell it in the most authentic way you can, while also demonstrating your capacity to be a good writer, researcher, etc. Okay? Discuss how you would contribute to the field of study, okay? Or the discipline. And make sure that you're setting yourself apart. Writing a personal statement also means thinking about what others might be saying, what other applicants might be saying, okay? Don't just say the same thing that every applicant says. Say something so compelling that really draws your audience in. So as you're telling your story, as you're narrating your story in written form, tell the admissions committee why your field of study interests you, okay? Really explain why you are a good candidate for graduate study in that program. Ask yourself, in a pile of 200 to 400 applications, would I enjoy reading my personal statement? So think of it this way. You're on the admissions committee. Would you enjoy reading your personal statement? And would you find your personal statement compelling? So a lot of you have meaningful experiences. These are important, but should only be mentioned briefly. And if they have relevance to what your study, what your research areas are, okay? Mention them if that's what motivated your desire to study X, Y, or Z, okay? Your application, and I've already talked about this, your application materials already contain a summary of your accomplishments. So try to avoid repeating information from your transcripts or your reference letters or your CV, because it's not going to help you. All they're going to do, admissions committees are going to do is say, well, they already said this here, or it was already mentioned here, so it's not very compelling. Here's a really big one, all right? Give yourself enough time to organize your thoughts, write well, edit as necessary, and start early. I cannot stress this enough, but however much time you are preparing for the GRE is how much time you should be putting into writing your personal statement. These things are what admissions committees, or what the graduate school would call holistic admissions. They want to see a whole self. They don't want to just see your standardized scores. So admissions committees usually read applications in this order: your basic application and demographic profile. Your personal statement is number 2. Your letters of recommendation, your CV, your writing sample or research paper. Then they look at your GRE. Now, I'm not saying that the GRE isn't important. It is, especially in STEM fields. But imagine this. If you're studying 4 months for the GRE and that's your only focus, and you only have 2 weeks left to ask for letters of recommendation and pull together your personal statement, and you throw it together at the last minute, your GRE scores are not going to matter if an admissions committee cannot get through that personal statement. So, however much time you are spending with your GRE is how much time you should be spending with all of the components of your application, including your personal statement. So give yourself plenty of time to revise, to edit, proofread, all of that. Follow the instructions. That is really, really important. A lot of people ask me, Christopher, what is a supplemental application? What's a supplemental statement? Supplemental means that it's in addition to. So again, if they're asking you for a personal statement and they're asking you for a supplemental statement, be sure to follow the instructions on the supplemental statement. Now, a lot of programs at Maryland, particularly in the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences, and some in the College of Ed, some in the College of Arts and Humanities, will ask you to provide a supplemental application. And it'll usually be 1 or 2 questions. And the questions might be something like, please describe your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Or it might say, please describe in 3 paragraphs or less what attracted you to this program. Now, if you've already said it in your CV, in your personal statement, then I would find a creative way to say it differently, or to revise your personal statement so that you're not being redundant, okay? Couple of other do's and don'ts, okay? Mostly don'ts. So everything before that were do's, okay? Here are some don'ts. Be mindful about name dropping in your personal statement. If you have 3 pages to write about yourself, what motivates you, how you'll be successful in this program, what you contribute, how you got interested in this field of research, don't spend 3 pages talking about how fantastic the faculty are and reiterating what they already know. all you think you're doing is demonstrating that you know how fantastic that the faculty are in that program. And that's great. You should be doing that. But be mindful that if you're spending 3 pages talking about how fabulous they are, then that's 3 pages. You're not talking about how fabulous you are. They want to know how fabulous you are and why you want to be in this program, and they want to measure your success in that program. So that's a don't, or be mindful. Another thing to be mindful about in terms of name dropping is be sure that, one, if you drop somebody's name like faculty, that they're still alive, because this has happened where somebody will say, I want to go to this program and I really want to work with this one particular faculty. Well, if that faculty has passed away, which has happened, the admissions committee might say, well, this applicant only wants to work with this one faculty, therefore we're going to reject them because that faculty no longer is with us. Another reason to be mindful about name dropping is, and this has happened as well, if you say, I really want to work with Professor so-and-so because their research is fantastic, the admissions committee might say, well, that's wonderful. Maybe this applicant should apply to the institution that this professor works at now. So in other words, do your research. Make sure that if you're name dropping, that the faculty is still employed at that institution in that program and that they are alive. So those are some do's and don'ts. I would also steer away from mentioning anything about funding and about how there are great funding opportunities. Your personal statement should really identify your fit, for lack of a better word, in that program. It should really be a define why you'll be successful there, what you contribute as much as what the program will help you do, which is get that career, that job. But be mindful that while there's no template, there are some do's and don'ts. And I hope that I've covered enough today for you all to at least get started. Remember, ask yourself that question before you even think about your schools or think about where do I even start? Well, that was the question. Where do I start? How do I start? Start by asking yourself those questions. Why do I want to go to graduate school? What do I want to get out of graduate school? And what do I want to do after graduate school? Use a strengths-based approach. Talk about what motivates you. Create a compelling narrative about yourself. And follow instructions. So that was today's Ogden Answers Your Questions on personal statements. Couldn't cover everything. I can do a whole hour, 2-hour session on personal statements alone, but I hope this was helpful for folks who follow me on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel. You're gonna get more of these kinds of things in the Ogden Answers Your Questions series, so look out for those. And I hope that you found this to be a useful presentation. Good luck as you write your personal statement or your statement of purpose. And as always, be sure to email gradschool@umd.edu if you have questions about your graduate application, and email me, Christopher Perez. I'm the director in the Office of Graduate Diversity Inclusion. And my email is cperez6@umd.edu. If you have follow-up questions or if you have other questions that you would like me to address in this series. Take care, everyone. Bye.